Peace and greetings. This is Artis, and this is the Artis Smith Yoga Podcast. So, we are on episode 2, and we're going to continue the conversation on yoga and talk about the origins of modern day yoga. There's a long history. Yoga has a really long history, and that's something I might get into in later videos about the origins of yoga. But we're going to talk about modern day yoga and where that comes from. So you've got hot yoga, you've got vinyasa yoga, you've got kundalini yoga, you've got kundalini yoga might be an exception, and I'll get into that. You've got all these different types of yoga, and they all have their root and their foundation in Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga. Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga was brought to the United States in the early 70s. And it was brought to the United States by Pattabhi Jois and Manju Jois. It was discovered by David Williams and Nancy Gilgoff. They, from my understanding, were the first two to go to Mysore and learn. David Williams was, I'm not sure who he was with, but he went to India to study yoga, and he came across Manju. Manju was like, hey, well, you should go see my dad. His father, of course, Pattabhi Jois. David, became super interested. Other people from the West started coming, and then it, branched out. They brought Pattabhi to the United States, brought him to California, and Encinitas, I believe, is the first place they landed, and it spread from there. And what a lot of people learned the Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga method, and some of them continued to teach the method just as it was taught to them, and then other people took it and reformulated it into something that they wanted, right? So that's where you get power yoga, your hot yoga, Bikram yoga comes from that. You have any type of vinyasa. Anytime someone says vinyasa yoga, we're doing a vinyasa yoga, it has its roots in the standing up teacher in front of the classroom instructing the class. That has its roots with Pattabhi Jois, T. Krishnamacharya. And an interesting story, Pattabhi Jois, so it started with, he would teach just about maybe 10 or 11 people at a time and have them in a room. And he would give them their own personal sequence. Okay? This is when he was dealing with people in India. They would come to them, the doctors would send people to him when they couldn't do anything with them. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. They would send them to Pattabhi Jois. Pattabhi Jois would be like, okay, well, here's these set sequence of poses, eat this, do this. And then they would come in every day, and it would be a group of them. He would be working with people. Like it was like a, what you call, not a hospital, but like a clinic, I guess you could say. And so people would come, and so he would have maybe 10 or 11 people at a time, and he was working with the sequences that he learned and that he put together, these particular poses. So all these people from the West were coming, and he had to figure out how to safely instruct all of these people on, yoga. And so what he did was he took the Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga system that he had developed with T. Krishnamacharya and with Manju. Manju tells us that he was a guinea pig, so to speak. And when he was a little boy, they would, his father would try out the poses using him, like, hey, get into this, get into that, and then work with how the sequences would work. And so he taught this Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga to a whole, he was doing it now to a whole room full of people, maybe 20 people. And so all these people from the West kept coming, and he had to pretty much change the way he taught yoga. Instead of working with people one on one, he had to change the way he was doing things in order to accommodate a large group of people, 20 people, 30 people maybe. And so from there, these people learned, these Westerners, they came, they back and forth from Mysore to California, and they learned the Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga method, and they took that and turned it into your power yoga, your hot yoga, your Bikram yoga, any type of Vinyasa yoga. That's where it comes from. It comes from the 6 series of the Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga system. All of those poses, and there's so many poses, and so they all, and the style, the breath with the movement, all of that comes from your Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga. The word Vinyasa was kind of coined by T. Krishnamacharya, who again is the pretty much the founder of modern day yoga. The yoga that we know of today, he's the guy who started it all. So that's a short history on yoga, and where it comes from, just touching on modern day yoga. And there was a conversation that you've got all of these different types of yoga out now, and what some people don't know is that in ancient times, when yoga first got started, or when yoga was first blooming, there were many, many, many different styles and types of yoga. Many, many different styles and types. And it got, what happened was, it got it all got put together in, so there's one, the oldest book that we know of that talks about yoga and gives you a complete comprehensive look at yoga, is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. That book gives you a synopsis. It says, okay, here, this is yoga. It's an excellent book. I highly recommend you read it. And it goes through what is yoga, it goes through how to practice yoga, and it goes through all the benefits that come through yoga, right? The Yoga Sutras, the sutra means thread, and so a lot of times you may hear it chanted. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, you hear it chanted. I listen to a recording sometimes that is a whole full chant. It takes like 20 minutes for the whole thing to go, right? And so it's a really really awesome thing to listen to. Kind of puts my mind at ease. So the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali is the first complete text on yoga. Now, a very interesting thing about the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali is that the only time that a physical, the word asana is only used once. It's only used once. From my understanding, I think, it's only used one time. Maybe one other time. But there's no talk about doing a physical asana yoga practice. It alludes to that, but it does not specifically state that. It says, I think the only sutra is, it's Siddha Sukham Asanam, which means the posture should be steady and agreeable. And when it is, it becomes an asana. It becomes a seat of meditation, which goes back to what I spoke about before, we do the physical practice in order to get the mind or get the body under control so we can get the mind under control so we can sit down for a long period of time. That's the reason we do the practice. That's the reason we do it. There's and talking about the yogas and talking about, so you had all of those different types of yogas that got just uh, put into one idea. All right, this is yoga, right? In the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And then after that, you get the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is another excellent book. This book lays out poses. It gives you a lot more history. It also gives you the benefits of certain poses. I mean, it's an excellent book. It's it was one of the books that was part of the curriculum in my yoga teacher training. I've gone in and out of that book so much. It's an excellent book. So, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and the Hatha Yoga Pradipika are excellent books to get if you really want to do a deep dive into yoga, right? And another good book is the Bhagavad Gita. Now, the Bhagavad Gita is more of a religious text, but it still has, um, a scientific basis feel to it. It's I would kind of compare it a little bit to the Bible as far as like there's a lot of um, uh, hidden messages. Think it's a lot of uh, different ways to translate what is being said. You know what I mean? And you can take it in a lot of different ways. So, when you're looking at and when you're looking at the Bhagavad Gita, it is good. And I had a discussion with someone about translations. I've only looked at one translation of the Bhagavad Gita, but this person is right on point. Look at different, she was like, look at different translations. It's good to, she likes to look at different translations because what happens is when you do that, you get a bigger picture, right? You get a bigger picture. My go-to book is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. That's the one I always go back to. It's like the root for me because you can get into so many different avenues, so many different books, so many different ideas about yoga. And I did that when I first got started. And then what I thought, I looked at what was really attractive to me and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. One of the things, one of the things about me, what I like to do is if I discover something that is interesting to me, I always like to go to the root of it. I'm like, okay, where did it start? What's the first of this thing? You know what I mean? And when I found out that the first of this thing is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, I immediately gravitated to that book. I read that book and it really, really resonated with me. What really resonated with me in the book are the 8 limbs of yoga. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. The 8 limbs of yoga. I try to the best of my ability to live my life according to those 8 limbs. And again, I try to the best of my ability to live my life according to those 8 limbs. That's my foundation. That's what keeps me rooted. And then everything else that I read or everything else I consume, I use that as a compare contrast thing. Like, okay, how does that match up with how I feel, about the 8 limbs? How does that match up with the 8 limbs? My teacher training, just to talk about that, my teacher training was a really solid teacher training. I was fortunate enough to work with uh, a, a teacher that this guy was kind of like, or is, he's extremely smart. And I thought for a second, I'm like, this guy must have a photographic memory, one of those type of people, right? Super smart guy, super calm, cool, relaxed. Shout out to AJ. Atma Bodhi Yoga. So he was my first yoga teacher, and he really taught me a lot. The teacher training it encompassed everything, right? So I'll tell the story of how I started with yoga, how I got started. I was living in Virginia Beach. I was working at uh, Applebee's, and I was a shift leader moving into management. I had been a manager before that, I had been a manager for Ruby Tuesdays for like 8 or 9 years. And I had moved to Virginia Beach, in the Virginia Beach area, and I had stopped. Well, I wanted to change, I wanted to shift gears in my career. When I was younger, I worked in a lot of fine dining restaurants. I was classically trained when I was in my early 20s. Uh, and so I was really interested in haute cuisine, but I kind of got away from it, from fine dining. I kind of got away from it. And then when I moved to Virginia Beach, I started working at, you know, uh, this particular restaurant, working at Ruby Tuesdays. So kind of something just hit me. I think, no, that's what I was watching. Anthony Bourdain, his show, when his show first came out. So that's dating a little bit. So it was the show he had. I forgot the name of it, but it kind of like resparked my interest in fine dining. And so I transitioned from working in casual to working in some higher end restaurants. And I went back to culinary school. So I'm doing these things, going back to culinary school, working at these higher end restaurants. And I get to a point where I'm at the best restaurant in the area. Like this restaurant is arguably the best restaurant in the area. I'm working there and I'm really enjoying it, and then I get fired. And I get fired, and it kind of shifts my mind. You know what I mean? It's like, oh man, I really like this place. I thought I was doing well. I thought they liked me, but boom, I get fired. And so I felt hurt, right? And I just started rethinking about what I wanted in my life. I'm like, I thought about, I was asking myself these questions like, what is really driving me to be this 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 super chef, this like Michelin star chef? What is really driving me to do that? Why do I want to do that? And it was all based on my ego. It was all me wanting. It was all based in my ego. It was all me wanting to, um, you know, uh, be famous, wanting people to like me, wanting people to want to be me. Like, oh man, look at artists. That's what was the main driver, and it made me question everything. Like, okay, wait a minute, really? Is this really what I want to be doing, right? And so um, I just sat for maybe like 2 or 3 weeks in my apartment and just it wasn't a depression. It was like a in a cocoon kind of thing, butterfly. I'm just like getting down deep, and so I wasn't working. I was just at my apartment, so I was running out of money, and I was like, okay, I got to do something. I got to get another job. I got to find out. I got to do something, and so I started doing some day labor, um, and that's hard work. Anybody that's done day labor, you go to like I was on Craigslist. You know what I mean? Doing day labor. That's all I could find at the moment because I could have jumped right back into the restaurant business, but I didn't want to do that. I was like, so I started doing this day labor, and I started working with this brick mason. And so this brick mason was, we had one particular job where we were building a driveway. No, I'm sorry, a walkway. The walkway was from the street up into the front of these people's house. And so and it was windy, right? So imagine nice big house, brick walkway winding up to the front door, right? So what we had to do was we dug out the curved walkway, and he whipped out his tools. He was doing all the dimensions on all of it, and then we dug up the hole. You know what I mean? Dug it up, and then when we dug up the trench, the curved trench, we had to lay down a couple of different layers of different things like sand and gravel, and finally we worked on getting it all even and level all the way, sides, everything even and level. And then he started to lay the bricks. We started to lay the bricks. And so, and he laid each and every individual brick all the way from the top to the bottom. And so when we were finished, I looked at it and I was like, and it took us like, what, 3 days to do it? Something like that. When we finished, I looked at it and I was like, and something hit me. It was like, okay, here we go. Right? You've been completely gutted out, and now here is a new pathway. And so I was like, okay, what is this new pathway? What is it? What is this new pathway? And at the time, and before that, I always like to listen to self-help material, right? And at this particular time, I was listening to David Proctor, and Bob Proctor is his name, Bob Proctor. And so Bob Proctor mentioned the Upanishads, and I was like, the Upanishads. I'm like, I remember the Upanishads. I remember that. Where do I know that from? And so I started doing some research, looking at the Upanishads, and then it occurred to me, I'm like, that's a part of yoga. And then I remembered the doctors that worked that were the owners of the Indian restaurant that I started working at when I was younger, and one of them mentioned yoga. But my friend and I, at the time, he was like, yeah, you guys party too much, you smoke, you drink, you can't do yoga. And so we kind of like forgot about it. That was my first someone first talking about yoga. And I don't want to get off subject. So I'm at a point where, that's right. So I did the brick mason work. It felt like a clearing, like a cleansing, like okay, here's a new pathway. What is this new pathway? I had to figure it out, right? And it was a windy pathway. It wasn't going to be easy. And so I'm like, what is this new pathway? And so again, I heard that word Upanishads, heard the word, and then it directly related back to the doctors and the word yoga. And so I was like, yoga. Let me try some yoga. Let me do yoga. I want to try some yoga. I want to do some yoga. I felt really excited about it. I was like, something inside of me was like, okay, this might be interesting, something new. Okay, so I immediately went out and bought a yoga mat, right? Went out and bought a yoga mat. And I went to, actually looked up online the nearest yoga studio to me, and it was Atma Bodhi Yoga. Went to the yoga studio, saw what time it was. June the 3rd of 2013. It was a noon class with Callie. Callie was the first person to introduce me to yoga. Shout out to Callie, peace. And I walked in the door, I asked her, I said, hey, can you tell me, I was like, can you tell me a little bit more about yoga? I kind of know some stuff, I've been reading some stuff, but she said, listen, I can show you better than I can tell you. We got a class at noon, you're welcome to join. I'm like, okay, yeah. The class starts, and then she starts with the instruction. And then what happens is she instructs a downward facing dog. Okay. Now she says, okay, I want you to, and I think we started from an extended child's pose position. And then she said, all right, extend your legs into downward facing dog. And then she said, look in between your feet. And when she said that, a light bulb went off in my head. Everywhere, everything was like, wait a minute. And I knew at that point, June the 3rd, 12 o'clock noon class, 2013. I said, I knew from here on out, I'm going to learn this and I'm going to teach this. This is who I am. I put that label on myself. I immediately took that label. This is who I am, because I'm I subscribe to reincarnation, and it felt like, okay, this is what you have been doing. This is what you were doing before. Now it's time to start doing it again, and you're gonna do it again, right? You got there. This is your work. This is your work, and so that's what got me started on yoga. And then I started. There was an Ashtanga Mysore class at that studio, and I started taking Ashtanga from there. Learned Ashtanga, and then, like within a month or two, the teacher AJ had Manju Joyce come in to do a workshop. And when I met Manju Joyce, it was like it was one of those things like, okay, this is my teacher. Like this is my teacher. This is my teacher. And then from then, I was in 2000. I met Manju Joyce in 2013, and since then, I've been working with him. I worked with him closely then. He came back a couple of times. I did a few more workshops. Then there was a teacher training, kind of like a teacher training he did there in Virginia Beach. I did that with him. And then also I was fortunate enough to host him when I lived in Norfolk and Virginia Beach. He came down. It was awesome. And so I haven't seen him in a long time, but I still work with him via the internet, watching videos. I listen to I listen to his chants every single day, constantly. I'm working on learning those chants. That's one of the things that he likes for us to do, to work and learn those chants. And so to get on to just to touch on that subject of having a teacher, of having a main teacher. So Manju Joyce is my main teacher. He's my go-to guy. I also like to work with, and I mentioned this before, David Garrigues. And I also have a teacher here in Fullerton. I don't want to mention her name because I don't know if she, some people don't like being talked about, especially if you don't tell them. So, but I'm working with a teacher here in Fullerton who's a student of Manju. And so working with a main teacher is super beneficial because you gain progress when you are consistent. Okay? You gain progress when you are consistent. So when you gain progress when you are consistent. So when you're working with the same teacher, you're going to get the same information most of the times, and you're going to be able to see your progress. For instance, in Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga, if you practice on a daily basis, you're going to do triangle every single time. You're going to do triangle every single time. Okay? Now, you're not going to do triangle the same way every single time. That's the key. Every day is different. but that pose is still the same. So that's how you gauge everything, right? By approaching that same thing every single day and looking at it every single day. Doing different yoga poses, yeah, that's cool, whatever, but every single day I do a particular poses every single day. And the one of the main things I do, sun salutations every single day, or every single time I do my practice, which is just about every day. And I've talked about it in other videos, but you talk about how often should you do your practice. You should do your practice every single day, and then let life give you a day off, right? I talked about that before. Like, plan on doing it every single day, but if your wife or husband or child or a significant other needs you for something, then don't do it. Help them. Your friend, hey man, I need some help moving. Help them. Skip that day of practice, but plan on doing it every single day and let life give you the day off, right? So I talk about that. And so, uh, yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'll end it here. Again, if anyone has any questions, comments, or concerns, um, please reach out. Let me know, and I'd love to answer those and open the discussion. And until then, thank you for watching, and peace.